The idea of the vaccine is that they're going to inject it into your deltoid. The mRNA is going to, it's going to be transcribed in the muscle cells of your deltoid, and once enough spike proteins, so the cells themselves they have little machines in them called ribosomes. They produce proteins. The mRNA they put in, that's just like a little transcript, it's a little information strip, right? And that little information strip gets read by a ribosome, and it says, okay, got it. It's like, think of it as like a 3D printer or something. Like you give it a little bit of information and it prints out this spike protein, and then it just stays there inside the cell. And then you do another one, and then you get so many of them that cell ruptures, and then it dumps spike protein all into the blood. And it's supposed to stay locally. I don't really know how it's supposed to stay local, but apparently it does the majority of the time. But
so it stays local in the deltoid.
But
isn't it doesn't explode? Doesn't it get in the bloodstream and systemically it just travels?
I mean, that's the way it has to work, right? Because you're building an immune response to it. I don't know if because you're putting it in the muscle, it's not being taken up into the bloodstream, and it's just staying in the interstitium, the fluid between cells. I don't know the physiology of how that's supposed to work. But
could they tell? And this is, so for example, if somebody got the vaccine, could you do blood? Could you take blood and tell whether or not the person had the vaccine?
Yes. Yeah. So
is that for all, or just this mRNA?
But that would mean that it's traveling because.
Well, so there's another phenomenon of the vaccine that's causing platelets to be really sticky. And they form something that's called a rouleau formation. So think of like stacking up chips in Vegas. So your red blood cells stack up like that. And instead of just being free floating and randomly around, they're floating around in these big stacked columns, which means that you're hypercoagulable and you're more likely to. But because it's only happening at the platelet level, I say red blood cells, I meant platelets. So they're stacking up, and since it's happening at the platelet level, it's mainly microvascular. So it's like super, super small vessels, like in your kidneys and in your retina and in your penis. So probably there's some truth to this impotence thing. And
you mean the Nicki Minaj with the testicles exploding?
Right. And what I was going to say is the other thing that
how crazy is that?
I haven't heard this.
So Nicki Minaj, just to tell you, came out, and I guess one of her cousins in Trinidad was at a wedding where the groom got the vaccine and his balls shriveled up, and basically is like, all this man equipment, and the wedding was called off. So the bride called it off. So she was like, hey, you guys need to, those of you guys getting the vaccine need to check yourself, and more importantly, like, know what the fuck you're putting in your bodies. And
do your own research, she said.
Because his testicles exploded?
I don't know if they exploded, but they got real big.
Right.
And so at that point, the liberal media, whatever it was, started attacking her. And the White House, which is hilarious.
That made her an anti-vaxxer because she said you should do your own research and know what's going on.
So then the White House had to have a press conference. And like my favorite part was the dude that was like, so you're telling me these motherfuckers are this ridiculous that they got to have a White House press conference about Nicki Minaj?
Right.
And she's kind of a big deal, John.
Well, she's got like 100 million Instagram followers. She has more Instagram followers than I think the White House does.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's fucking crazy. But they started coming at her, and then CNN sent people down to Trinidad and this whole deal. And they said her family was on lockdown, and she basically was calling these people out, being like, "You don't want to fuck with me. I run this bitch." I mean, Nicki Minaj is now like in like the right wing activist camp. So like if you would have told me,
even though she's a BLM supporter and like total leftist, and it's like,
so here's the deal: you can do all that stuff, but you disagree once, you're fucking
anything you disagree with.
So now she's a right wing shill, and a Tucker Carlson. I mean, it's just like, it's fucking insanity.
Yeah. So where I was going with that is the 30% of the time that it is leaking out, they're finding it in microvascular. So when I was saying the impotency thing, if you think about, the tissue that makes your penis erect is called the corpus cavernosum, and it's like a little sponge, and then you fill that sponge up with a lot of fluid, and then you block it from being able to return out. The more pressure you put in there, you're making the sponge really hard, and it has like a sheath on the outside called Buck's fascia that's like 3 times thicker than most fascia. It doesn't expand, and so you just make that sponge really tight inside that sheath. Well, if you can cause microvascular damage with these spike proteins, you could potentially cause microvascular damage and the corpus cavernosum itself and block the blood flow going in, or block the blood flow coming back out, causing priapism, which could damage your penis as well, right? But what they have found unequivocally is that when these spike proteins do get out, which they're the most recent data I've heard is around 30% of the time, it looks like it's leaking out to the entire body. Spike proteins are accumulating where you'd expect them to with the microvascular. So in the kidneys, which you have, because you're going down to a ton of capillaries that are, balancing the salts in your blood with the plasma or the fluid of your blood, like getting rid of the right amount of water, so that kidneys are crazy amount. Like that's all they are, is essentially a bunch of little capillaries. And then adrenals, which also have a bunch of tiny capillaries, and ovaries and testicles, because ovaries and testicles essentially is the same organ. So there's a really good chance that if those spike proteins were to keep accumulating, they could cause inflammation. And if they get enough inflammatory response inside the ovary, inside the testicle, you probably can disable that, or seriously impair that organ's ability to do its job. Now, how long is that going to last? Is that permanent, lifelong thing? You're going to completely destroy your ovaries and testicles if this happens to you? We don't know. But
because we haven't done the research.
Because we don't have the time.
Well, we don't have the time.
Right. Not enough time has passed. It's not that we don't have enough time in the day. And I tell people this all the time. It's like developing a vaccine does not take a long time. It's done in weeks to months. You can develop a vaccine. They developed this current vaccine. Pfizer, decoded it and figured out how to make the vaccine in like 2 or 3 days. It wasn't a big deal. It's like the reason it takes so long is because you have to test it. You have to test it for efficacy and you have to test it for safety. And it takes a long freaking time to figure out how safe it is. And that's why, 30 or 40% of all drugs that get approved get pulled off the market eventually, because turned out to cause cancer or turned out to cause blindness.
I think what it comes down to is you as an individual have to make a decision that you feel comfortable with.
Right.
And, the idea of blanketly trusting anybody is never a good idea. So to the listeners of Power Athlete Radio, personal responsibility. Make sure that you're sleeping 8 hours, making sure you are eating a nutrient-dense diet. If you're over the age of 40, go watch that Michael Rose AHS talk about returning to your ancestral diet. I think it was AHS 11. Excellent. So looking and returning back to the ancestral diet, making sure you're doing some form of lifting weights, some form of metabolic conditioning that looks like HIIT, and some aerobic-based training, like if on our training programs like Grindstone, Jack Street, Field Strong, Hammer, Lean and Able, they all follow a very, very similar template. And if you're over the age of, let's say, 40, 45, 50, and you're in that age group, making sure you're going and seeing a doctor, getting checkups. If you have any issues, not just fucking avoiding them, going and finding a guy like Doc Parsley to look at your hormones. And if you have any hormonal issues, making sure you're working with somebody to balance those out so you can live your best life. And, you as the individual have to take personal responsibility for yourself, because nobody is coming to fucking save you. Nobody's hiding around the corner. I wrote that blog years ago. Nobody's hiding around the corner to grab you and save you. You as the individual have to seize the day and make sure that you make it as far as possible, because you owe it to your wife, to your kids, and the people around you within your tribe to fucking make it as far as you can. And at the end of the day, don't go along. Like sheeps get fucking slaughtered because they go in groves. There's no problem standing there and being like, hey, I want to take it slow. I want more information. Or you know what? I want to hear from trusted experts. Or you know what? I just don't know. So you know what? I'm not going to make a decision until I have more information. So that's my public service announcement. Thanks for another episode of Power Athlete Radio.
Bye.